All right, we're live.
Okay, thank you. This is Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing to take testimony on the 2024 budget. And we're have the Commissioner of Dale and staff here today. And so we will get started. We apologize for our little late start. Senator Westman, I believe, has your section of the budget, and he seems to be MIA in spite of our best efforts to track him down. So we'll get started, and then hopefully he'll come in shortly. So welcome, Commissioner. And do you want to introduce the staff you have with you as well?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Monica White, and I am the Commissioner of the Department of Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living, also known as DALE, and I am joined by Deputy Commissioner
Megan Tierney Ward. Hello.
Hi, and our Financial Director,
Bill Kelly.
Great. Well, thank you. And I'm not clear on how much time we have this afternoon. I think we were slated for an hour. Is that accurate? Okay. So,
yes.
Okay. Thank you. So wanting to perhaps be the most crisp, would it be most helpful to walk through our ups and downs versus our budget testimony document?
You do a great job of that text that that explains we don't need to have a description of various divisions, but then you usually have the document that describes the changes, and that really is helpful. The ups and downs gets into things like fee for space and, internal service charges. We don't really need to see that, but I think we would really like to see what you have for by division and programmatic recommendations. And then some discussion, obviously, around of the system of care and what's being recommended. And obviously, we've just come off two sessions of public hearings in terms of testimony for budget requests. And so many of those do relate to the programs that you administer. So we'd like to have time to discuss those as well.
Okay.
So do you have that document that I'm referring to?
I do. I'll share my screen and let's see. Okay. Are you able to see that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Great. So let me just move some things around on my screen here. And so I believe what you'll want to start on is page 36 in case you are scrolling along on your personal devices. So is this the section, Madam Chair, that you wanted
yes.
to start?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That I think it's very helpful.
Okay, fantastic. So without further ado, we'll dive right in. To start, this is Dale's administration and support budget, which covers the administrative costs across all of our divisions and services and staff costs and that sort of thing. So the changes that we have proposed in the governor's recommended budget include a $4.2 million up, which is a roll up and summary of salary and fringe, internal service funds, et cetera, et cetera. And then there are two what would consider policy ups that we have in here, a $318,000 increase, and that would be for 3 additional public guardian positions. And the Office of Public Guardian, the rationale for that is that we have for a number of years experienced growth in caseload with actually a decrease in staffing due to a couple of reasons, including an early retirement the early retirement incentive multiple years ago at this point, and the rescission several years before that. And so a decrease in staff, increase in caseload represents caseloads that are presently at extraordinarily high levels to where right now our caseloads are, each guardian presently serves a caseload of 30, and that includes supervisors are also, in addition to supervising staff, providing guardianship services to 30 individuals on average. And the national standard for guardianship is a 20 persons per guardian and 10 per supervisor. So to look to get more in alignment with national standards and safe practice for guardianship, we are requesting 3 additional public guardian positions in this budget. The next item in this appropriation, section B 329, is $350,000. I'm sorry, did I hear something? I thought it, okay.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so the next item is a $350,000 increase, and that is associated with a medical consultation contract that we have engaged with Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, specific for persons for developmental disability services, and giving us the additional capacity for a medical directorship service. We do not have an in-house medical director for developmental disabilities, and needing to have that expertise as it pertains to developmental disabilities was a priority. So that represents half of a 2-year agreement amount. So for a total of $4.9 million up in our jail administration appropriation. Moving on to jail grants, section B 330. And this is comprised of attendant programs to include attendant services program, adult day, and Older Americans Act services through Vermont's area agencies on aging. We have just a couple of items here. The first is $122,000 increase, and that is associated with the previously negotiated collective bargaining agreement for independent direct support professionals providing services under these programs. And then a small $22,000 increase associated with housekeeping for federal funds adjustment to true those up.
So then an adult services, basically you're level funding all the programs in that division. Is that correct?
That is correct. We do not have a rate increase for those programs within this division.
And could you tell us what programs are in that division that are being level funded?
Sure. So
you mentioned adult day.
Adult day, attendant services program, and Older Americans Act services through the area agencies on aging.
Jane?
Yes, Senator Starr.
Yes. Where is the Alzheimer's and the dementia person last night or late yesterday?
It isn't in there, Bobby. It's a request that is in addition to what the governor is asking for.
Would it go here or somewhere else?
Well, we can ask the commissioner. Obviously, the Alzheimer's Association had many witnesses appear before our 2 hearings, suggesting that an Alzheimer's coordinator position was sadly lacking. So if that position were approved, would that position work in the adult services division?
So yes, if we were to have a position for that body of work, it would be helmed within the adult services division, but the amount would be appropriated within the jail admin and support appropriation. So the name of this section B 330 is specific to the grants and programs that are external, whereas Dale staff costs are in the Dale administration appropriation.
And obviously that position is not in there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we have a long list, obviously, in terms of funding requests, including increased rates for adult day, nutrition programs, aging, a SASH, and the full array of aging services. So I'm sure that comes as no surprise. How did I know that we were told that the agency used an all-inclusive agency review. How did, can you, maybe this isn't the best, this should have been directed to the secretary, but obviously there's money for some initiatives and new things, but a decision has been made to level fund kind of the core existing programs. Have you, you obviously are aware that there's concern about level funding these programs and the services they provide in this inflationary environment. So I'm sure it's just a matter of what you were given for targets, but I was just wondering how these competing needs were prioritized from your perspective.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I think it is fair to say that there were some extraordinarily difficult decisions to be made in that there was not an unlimited amount of revenue to associate with increases. What I can say is that the Agency of Human Services did mindfully and intently look at programmatic costs across the division, so including Dale and the other 5 departments for sustainability overall, and focusing on prioritizing stabilization of sectors that were perhaps most at risk at this point financially, and recognizing that inflationary factors and other, that there certainly are pressures across multiple sectors, but the determinations as for recommended budget increases were done with the intent to stabilize across the human services sphere those perhaps most at risk of destabilization.
Right. I guess that gets into discussion about which populations are at greatest risk, but we're going to have that's squarely on our doorstep. I can tell you at this point, and I'm sure that's no surprise that we're getting those kinds of testimony, that kind of testimony and requests. So if we were to fund that position, it would be part of your admin. Was that, what is your position? Obviously the request has been made. There's been a lot of testimony that somehow that one position would make a critical difference in making services to the number of Vermonters who are diagnosed with some form of dementia better understood, more accessible, get information out, make the system perhaps less difficult to navigate. Was that request made to you as part of the budget process?
It was not made as part of the budget process. There was a requirement for us to submit a report. I believe it was due back in December to identify whether we could fund such a position through existing funds or grant opportunities. Mm-hmm. And in partnership with the Vermont Department of Health, we did an exhaustive exploration of, was there an opportunity to fund this work through any existing funds? And we determined that no, we could not, there was not additional funds that we could find for this in our existing resources. So that was submitted back in December. I think it's accurate to say that that is certainly an important body of work, and I would withhold assessment on the, I don't know what the proposed revenue the proposed funding stream would be for that. Certainly that is an important body of work for countless Vermonters. I lost a grandfather to Alzheimer's several years ago. I know very, very deeply how impactful Alzheimer's and dementias are to Vermonters and family members. And so certainly it's an important body of work, but I would withhold judgment, not knowing, knowing that the pieces are moving very rapidly, and not knowing on the revenue side kind of where that would land. So that's what
So we've had a grant funded position for how long?
Actually, I see Bill's hands up, so maybe I will pass to him.
I just wanted to back up a bit as far as the question of, we're looking at the Adult Services Division grants appropriation, but I just want to point out that there's other appropriations that belong with the Adult Services Division. And the brain injury, the TBI program and Choices for Care are part of that division. And in Choices for Care, there are some funds for rate increases. I just wanted to point that out.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I'll get to that.
The reason I was asking about the position, because the impression I got from the testimony was that really what this position would make a critical difference. But if in fact we've had the benefit of that position, it seemed like people were not reflecting on the progress that had been made with, in fact, having some entity in that. So it's sort of like, well, can one position somehow respond to all the expectations that we had articulated before us, because it becomes much larger and it's one diagnosis among a large, within the provider system and the treatment system arena. So if we've had the position a couple of years, I guess it seemed from the way people were talking, it was in the absence of anything that they were asking for that position. So maybe my interpretation of the testimony was wrong, but that was, perhaps other people did see it differently. But I guess I'd forgotten, like we always do when money's going away, we ask you to study it and see if you can figure out a way of funding it. So it's on the list.
Okay, and I would be happy if it would be helpful, Madam Chair, for us to kind of submit additional information on that separately, if that would be helpful.
All right. Well, if somehow the position were funded, it's a position that you've had the benefit of through a federal grant. You are not requesting it. You couldn't find the money. But if the position were funded, then from your perspective, the work that needs to be done and the significant incidence of Vermonters with this diagnosis would warrant or put a position to good use. Yes or no? I mean, it's not, I'm not asking you to advocate for it one way or the other, but I assume from what you're saying that there is work still yet to be done.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, Senator Westman?
Monica, Commissioner, I will be asking questions about that, and we'll have, that will be something we want to take up, because the testimony that we had at both of our public hearings, there was a huge number of people asking for that.
Yeah.
Did you get the impression that they were asking for it was like it was going to be something new added?
Oh, they had done, I clearly had the impression from what people were saying that this was a new position they were asking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
In,
Well, yes, Bobby.
up above in item 2, that we've gone through, are those 3 new, are they new public guardians up there in number 2? Are those new positions or just covering what we have already?
Senator Starr, those would be new positions. Those are the only 3 additional classified positions that we are requesting in this budget.
So why couldn't that be 2 new ones up there and 1 new one for the?
Well, if we
No.
did that, it would be with the knowledge, I think going back to her testimony, the commissioner's testimony is that we are asking the public guardians now to have a caseload of 30 individuals that they are the guardian for. And the standard is 20. So we would be making some progress, but not as much as the 3 positions if we diverted 1 to this other position. So it's a matter of do we ultimately, and I guess Senator Westman can advise us on this, is whether whether it would be recommended that we not meet the 3 public guardians, although this seems to be a workload response. And I know that the individuals that are have these public guardians, they can be fairly complex and they're managing all parts of their life. Monica, can you explain that, not only financially, but care decisions and housing decisions and so forth? Could you perhaps help us with that?
Certainly. Thank you for framing that out, Madam Chair. So public guardianship can include a range of powers of guardianship dependent upon the needs of the person and the ability of a friend or family member to step into any role within that. So it can include any or all powers relative to financial representative payee services. It can include medical decision-making, contractual powers of signing contracts, I think I said medical decision-making, but it can be, fairly broad depending on the person's needs and ability of having a friend or family member to step into any of that. And, generally there's a significant degree of vulnerability involved, and there can be significant amounts of work to assure that the guardian is able to uphold their duties as guardian in a timely manner and a person-centered manner that is focused on assuring the best interest of the person under guardianship.
And are these court-ordered guardianships?
Yes, they are court-ordered.
Yeah. All right. Other questions? Otherwise, we can just keep going down through.
Okay, great. So section B31, Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired grants. Again, this is programmatic related costs, not the staffing is within our administrative appropriation. We are not, we have 1 small federal fund adjustment amount in this appropriation. Brain injury program, section B334. So we have 2 items here. One is a projected utilization increase of projecting 2 additional persons coming into services for the next state fiscal year. And again, at $75,000 per person for $150,000 total. And then a small adjustment or increase of $8,200 for, again, associated with a collective bargaining agreement for independent direct support professionals providing brain injury services. All right, moving into our choices for care appropriation. And the changes that we have here are
Now number 4, that explains the 2 million we heard about. Okay, we might as well start from the top, but I think you will get to it.
All right, so for here, we have the first item is a $17.7 million increase, and that is associated with 2 components. One is the statutory inflationary rate increase for skilled nursing facilities of $4.9 million. And then the $12.8 million increase associated with rebasing skilled nursing facility rates on fiscal year 21 costs effective July 1st of this year at a $12.8 million. So those 2 items together reflect a $17.7 million increase there. The next item is a $718,000 decrease, which reflects a utilization decrease of about 0.5% in nursing home bed day utilization. The third item here is a $1.5 million increase, again associated with the independent direct support worker support professional collective bargaining agreement. And then rolling into number 4, which, as Madam Chair, you noted, was a $2 million utilization adjustment, which reflecting a decrease as point in time for moderate needs. And so I'll pause there because I think you had indicated that you wanted to have some discussion on that item.
Well, I'm not clear. Our utilization adjustment to moderate needs, are we all within the, is this within nursing homes, or is this on the acuity of care, or is this for community-based? Because are we talking about moderate needs population relative to adult days? I'm not sure what line 4, what provider entity or population the 2 million is relating to.
Okay, so I might phone a friend and tag in Megan, if you could provide a salient update on the moderate needs and this item, that would be appreciated.
Sure. The moderate needs part of Choices for Care program provides funding for some adult day services, some homemaker services, and something we call flexible funding. It's the services that are limited by the amount of funding. They're not considered the entitlement that the what we call highest services are. They are intended for folks who have a lower level of care. And those are typically the services that are being used. And this, as Commissioner White stated, was a point in time underutilization of those services when the budget was being created at the time. So the $2 million reflects unused funds in that portion of the Choices for Care budget.
Does this, well, considering how uneven, particularly adult days and in this still COVID environment, utilization has been really depressed. So I can see from a point in time where the utilization would be down, but this would be an ongoing base adjustment to the appropriation.
I'll hand that to
Yeah.
Bill Kelly, who I believe is nodding his head.
Yes, it would be a base adjustment. And the utilization so far this state fiscal year is trending in the same way that fiscal year 22 ended.
Does this, well, I'm going to let Senator Westman get a better fix on this. So the utilization is on the home and community-based side, not the nursing home side.
That's correct, Chair. That's correct.
But can I just
Yes,
ask you, if I'm understanding this $2 million reduction to moderate needs, what's to prevent those moderate needs from becoming major needs, and then you have to spend the money either in institutions or spend more money on that person? I mean, I thought that what we were trying to do was prevent these folks from ending up in nursing homes or in other settings. And I'm concerned that if we're saving $2 million here, we may end up creating a bigger need for those moderate need people.
Senator Sears, that's a great question. This number does represent funds unused, so it's not for people already receiving services. So, but there is always, it is something that does happen. Folks on the moderate needs program may have increased needs if, for whatever reason, that turn into a higher level of care, and then they come onto our higher level of our programs. I can check back in with Bill Kelly, but my understanding is that if we realize a sudden increase in a different direction over time, that increase would be brought to budget adjustment typically, if we're seeing an unpredicted pressure because of any change in that budget. Bill?
Yeah, but that just accounts for the money, but it doesn't account for the people that are now in a higher needs group.
So if I could, just to restate that these funds are currently being unused, and if there was a sudden increase in the higher acuity population, as we know, the savings language has a 1% reserve requirement for the high needs.
Mm-hmm.
Jane, can I ask a question? It's Jenny, Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Yeah, so one of the things that we, of course, hear about is the wait list and the wait list for moderate needs. So I'm just wondering how that fits in, and it goes along with, I think, what Senator Sears was saying is what's happening to these people. Is there a wait list, and would this money actually help some of those folks?
My understanding is that the wait lists are primarily for homemaker services, and that the biggest pressure for homemaker services through the home health agencies is the workforce. So folks who are waiting to get a service from their local home health agency may struggle to have services due to workforce, which is unrelated to whether there's funding at that agency. One option that Dale does have, and that's managed through our adult services division, is to work with providers to shift funds as needed if there are higher pressures with one agency than another. And then the last option is that folks who are waiting for homemaker services from their home health agency do have the option to consider flexible funds or a flexible use of moderate needs funds. That's usually would be used to hire their own homemaker or to hire a different kind of vendor to get that same type of service. So typically they're receiving those options as alternatives, but some people still may want just, this one service, homemaker service from their local home health agency, who may be not able to staff that service.
Well,
do
I
have one
guess-
question.
Yeah.
A follow-up question. So
Yes, go ahead.
because it's a workforce issue and we know that these folks are some of the lowest paid, so the, the home-based services are lower paid, have you explored the option of having an incentive pay to go in for this kind of work to help folks out?
So I think that was Senator Lyons. So thank you for that. So I'll kind of answer that maybe in two parts. So one, jumping ahead to the next item where we have proposed a $3 million rate increase for home health agencies, recognizing exactly that point. And two, the Agency of Human Services has been leading multiple healthcare workforce initiatives. So in terms of attracting or recruitment, retention, longer term across really all segments of the healthcare workforce. And I'm not prepared to speak to those with specificity today, but that if interested, a deeper dive, I'm certain that the AHS Secretary's office would be willing to come in and provide an overview and orientation on what those initiatives are. So recognizing that yes, in terms of incentivizing individuals to go into careers in that field, and we at Dale are involved with a number of those initiatives, but we don't present or represent the broader, header of the workforce development work. That might be a topic of interest for you.
One of the things that, getting back to the nursing homes, and I know that they have an occupancy rate that's part of the rate setting, and we're moving the base from 19 to 21. They have not been able to admit patients because of their staffing. And then, of course, we've gotten the natural complaints from our hospitals saying that they're having to keep patients that could be and should be cared for in a less intensive setting, but there's no place to move them. So what is your nursing home occupancy rate now? And is that still happening? And the extent to which this inflationary rate increase, is this over and above what would normally be the experience when you're moving from a base year of 19 to 21?
So thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll hit that from multiple angles. So we are involved with a number of initiatives and targeted projects specifically focusing on assuring that Vermonters are receiving care in the appropriate level of care. And so that to address the quote unquote people stuck in hospitals issue, which is layered and multifaceted. And Megan has been leading our efforts on a number of fronts. So I will ask her to provide a brief overview on those initiatives. In terms of the timing of like the inflationary increase that we have here versus what we might otherwise have. And then in terms of the rebase year changes, I don't know that offhand. And unless either Bill or Megan does, we can certainly follow up with you on that. So I guess before punting to Megan on an overview of some of the system of care stabilization work we've been doing, I might ask, do either one of you kind of have that historical context on the inflationary or rebase amounts offhand, or do we want to follow up with that?
Yeah, I would just roughly, I would say this inflationary nursing rebase total is approximately 3 times as high as it would be normally.
Thank you.
And the occupancy rate in September 21 was about 77%. In September 22, it was almost 81.
Sorry.
Could you repeat that again, please?
Something to 81.
Bill, there was a request to repeat that if you would.
Yeah. In September 21, the total occupancy was about 77%. And in September 22, which I believe is our latest data, it's just about 81%.
But the rate setting standard occupancy is much higher, was what, 90 something?
Correct.
So if they're not at that occupancy target, then it does impact their rates. Is that how that would play out?
I can add some context. So the average occupancy prior to the pandemic was at about 83%. That's a trend we had seen gradually decreasing over time because of choices for care. We brought choices for care around because folks were given then the option to have that same level of care in different settings. And so we expected that the occupancy in nursing homes would have over time a decline in occupancy. So right before the pandemic, it was about 83%. Earlier in the pandemic, it was in the low 70s. So there's quite a dip when we were tracking. And as Bill said, it's slowly climbing. We do get some daily bed tracking information from facilities. It's a different source than what Bill was referring to, but as of this week, they're at about 82%. So we've helped support facilities to bring beds back online, really due to workforce. They are still licensed at the same number, but in some situations, they really can't bring some people into the beds they can't staff. So the work that we've done with facilities is to help them be able to staff those beds, whether it's through a rate adjustment. You may recall in BAA, there was funding to help do a retroactive inflationary increase in 22 through the 23 timeline. We've issued a number of grants to target some facilities who were able to use contract staffing to bring beds back online to help offset that cost. And then with the upcoming rebase, one of the reasons it's so high is because the costs they're capturing are during that time when really staffing costs were so much higher, whether it was due to contract staffing, travel staff, or at the general cost of hiring nursing staff. So there's all of those factors included. So we're trying to support facilities in that way. The 90% that you're referring to is a rate setting factor that the Division of Vermont Health Access uses within their rate setting calculations. I cannot speak to any detail about the rate setting calculations, but there have been past legislative reports that describe the negative impact that 90% factor has on the rate setting for nursing homes.
Okay, well, there's obviously a lot of interest in choices for care. The other provider group, facility-based, are residential care homes. And so the question, are they in this budget, they're level funded at the current rate of reimbursement?
That is accurate, yes.
And yet, so I understand home health, and I'm not disputing home health needs an increase because of all the factors you talked about, workforce, but with residential care homes, they've got increased operating costs. They've got, their staff, many of their, they have a healthcare workforce. It just was, it's just, we're hearing, the need for their staff and pay and costs and the care, because so many people are aging in place. And so I think, once again, that's just something that is on our list. And I just want to confirm that the proposal from the governor is to not to make any adjustments upward of those rates, but we'll obviously have to consider all the different requests for funding. But when it comes to the healthcare workforce, and I know Senator Sears is experiencing it very directly, the difficulty of hiring people. The jobs are difficult, and fundamentally, we have fewer workers available to address the workforce demand, regardless of what particular sector, but certainly in healthcare, some of those jobs are particularly difficult and challenging. So other questions, or shall we go on to the next section? Okay, let's move on then.
All right. So then moving down to page 38, starting with at the top with this is the developmental services appropriation. And the changes that we have here, so starting with line item number 1, that represents an $8.2 million increase, and that funds caseload for 353 individuals coming on into services over the course of the next state fiscal year, at about $46,000 per person. So that would be 16.4 million. That is offset by an adjustment from equity fund, which essentially is the amount that is returned to the program after consumers leave the program. It's an annual process that it's been in place for well, I don't want to say from the beginning of time, but certainly for quite a long amount of time. But the first item is that $8.2 million for DS caseload. The second item is $1.2 million increase, which reflects caseload for persons coming in under what is called the Public Safety / Act 248 caseload. And that represents an additional 15 persons coming into services through that channel at $80,000 ish per year, reflecting a $1.2 million increase. The
Now, in the budget adjustment, we added 5 more cases. These are very expensive, obviously. Are we seeing, is this a standard number of accretions per year, or is this higher than historical?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So the next item, item 3, is the annualization of what we would call the caseload outliers for public safety. So the BAA item was, I forget the number offhand for BAA, but this is the annualized figure for those 5 individuals coming in whose needs are known to be or projected to be significantly more acute and therefore requiring more staffing, more services, and more expensive. So for those 5 in particular, we felt it prudent to call out as its own budget line item, reflecting that known pressure. So back to number 2, the caseload of 15 additional persons coming on board, I believe tracks with kind of what we see on an annual basis for new caseload coming in under the Public Safety / Act 248, but I would look to Bill to confirm or correct. Please.
Yeah, so in fiscal year 20, it was 17. In 21, it was 10. And in 22, it was 19. So
it's right in the ballpark then. But obviously the 5 outliers, when you annualize the cost, are much greater than the 80,000, 80.5 thousand then.
Correct.
Committee, not everybody knows Act 248. Certainly Senator Sears would know, but those are individuals who cannot be adjudicated for some criminal action because of their intellectual disability. And so they are oftentimes in settings that require a 2-on-1 supervision in order to assure public safety. And they're very expensive cases, as you can see from the annualization cost on line 3 combined with what we had in the BAA. So that's when we're referencing Act 248. It's that group of individuals that are under the, I guess they're in your custody. Is that right, Commissioner?
Correct.
Yeah.
There's only 5 of them, right?
No, our
No.
caseloads, I believe that was Senator Starr. So the current caseload numbers I don't have right at my fingertips, but I believe it's 25, in the 25 range presently. That number fluctuates regularly with new people coming into caseload, occasionally, periodically people being discharged as no longer reflecting a threat to public safety. So that number is variable, but it hovers in the 20s, in the range of 20s as regular caseload for Act 248. I will point out that line number 2, so is inclusive of Act 248 caseload, but not exclusive to Act 248 caseload. There are a number of persons that are served through this the public safety funding stream for developmental services, and they are persons who may not have been adjudicated or deemed incompetent to stand trial and then ordered under Act 248 supervision, but their behaviors or risk factors might present a risk to public safety, and wanting to assure that they have a more intensive service package so that they don't end up committing violent or other crimes. And so that they're served with that kind of explains the cost differential from the this line of about $80,000 per person per year versus the non-public safety caseload of at about $46,000 per person per year. Is that helpful to help provide some information on that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, so then moving into line item 4, this is the collective bargaining agreement for, again, independent direct support professionals serving persons with developmental disability. I think I see Bill, you have your hand up. Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Sorry to interrupt. I was trying to get my hand off once you started, but for a point of clarity, the 353 individuals in number 1, that's not representing 353 new individuals to the system. That's representing about half would be new and half are currently in the system, but would have new needs. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Bill. That's an important clarification. So thank you.
So the 350, half of the 350 are new?
Correct.
Okay.
But how many, what is your total DS caseload? Are there some that are not, you're saying they half needed more services? So that would suggest that there are other members of the caseload that are just continuing to get the same level of services. Is 353 the total caseload, or just this subset of new and existing ones requiring more services?
It's just
Go ahead, Bill.
yeah, sorry, it's just a subset. The caseload's over 3,000.
Yeah, I just wanted to make I didn't know the total number, but it certainly is much more than 353.
Correct.
So just wanted to make that distinction.
Yeah.
And their care would, their cost would have been in your base appropriation of the 282.
Correct. Yeah. So thank you for that point of click for making sure that was clear, Bill. I appreciate it. All right. I don't know exactly where we were, but I think we're at 5.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So this $955,000 increase, which was also seen in budget adjustment, represents an additional an expansion to our crisis capacity in our DS system of care. In October of 2022, we engaged in a contractual agreement with Upper Valley Services to bring an additional 2 crisis beds online for developmental services, and the annualization of that as a base need, it represents the $955,000 that you see here. The line number 6, budget to actuals realignment, a decrease of $2 million. So this is an annual process that our budget, the caseload, the budget is built on a person's, each individual person's budget is built based on annual needs. And so our budget, regardless of when a person comes into services. So for example, an approval for someone coming into services in April, they would only have an actual 3 months of expenditures in that state fiscal year versus the 12 as appropriated. So this adjustment annual process does not impact Vermonters receiving services, does not impact providers. Number 7.
It's such an even figure.
Yeah, I don't know, Bill, if you want to provide any context to that very round figure. No.
Okay.
And so the next item is a net neutral across the agency agency budget overall of $118,000, which would be transferred to the Department of Vermont Health Access, associated with their overall initiatives in support of dental services. And the next couple of items are adjustment on the federal funds, and we received notice that the commercial policy for workers' compensation for independent direct support professionals who are paid through ERIS, that premium had increased. So that's what that item represents.
Has there been a higher experience of injuries? You know, that's not, that's fairly, well, maybe, I don't know what the total premium is, but over $250,000 seems like quite a bit.
Yeah, Bill?
Yeah, this is similar to the internal service funds. It's an increase that's just allocated to us. We don't have the details behind the premium per se.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And then the last item is our vocational rehabilitation appropriation, which is known as vocational rehabilitation in statute. We had rebranded that division's work as Higher Ability Vermont last year. But here we're not requesting any policy changes other than truing up to a more accurate projection of federal funds received for this division of a $3.1 million increase to more.
But your base appropriation, is that still the 80-20 match? And is that so? What is your federal funds adjustment? Is that some kind of an enhanced match, a special grant? Could you just explain that a bit more? Maybe Bill's got to do that.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yes, the main federal funding is Section 110 for both VR and DBVI, and it is an 80-20 match with a maintenance of effort requirement. And the maintenance of effort's a little higher than the 80-20. So this federal funds adjustment is to Section 110, and we're utilizing more of Section 110 than is in our base currently.
Thank you, Bill.
All right,
So,
I'm going to ask you, you assume I know what Section 110 is, but perhaps Senator Westman does. So,
Did you talk about number 9, the commercial policy? I know, Jane, you asked one question, but.
the
Is-
answer was that that's just that's done as part of a larger state policy, and that's the charge that is being levied against the program. So it's not anything the department controls. I imagine it's Agency of Administration or Risk Management that is responsible for negotiating that the workers' comp.
But that's only for this division though, right? I mean, that doesn't cover all the state employees.
No, that's right. No, no, and so it would cover what the heiress employed and what they are, where they're really personal caregivers, and the individual receiving the services determines who gets hired, and then there's a payroll system called heiress that does the reimbursement and the necessary tax and Social Security reporting. So it's only a piece.
Yeah,
thank you for that clarification, Madam Chair. So you are absolutely correct, is for the independent direct support professionals who are paid through ARIS. I will say that is for, that this amount is for all independent direct support professionals paid through ARIS. So for those providing services under developmental services, as well as Choices for Care and brain injury and others. But from an appropriation standpoint, it's parked in the DS appropriation. Bill, please use the cane to pull me off the stage if I completely boggled that.
yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we done through all the divisions then?
That is what we have for all of our appropriations. I'm happy to unshare the screen if we don't need that shared anymore. Do that. Let's see.
All right, obviously we've been asking questions as we've gone along. Other questions that we haven't, that perhaps committee members might have?
I'm fine.
No, I realize we're getting close to 3 o'clock, so we really kept you a bit longer, but you're our last presentation for the day, so our schedule is a little flexible. So it does give an opportunity to ask questions.
So I do have a hard stop at, I've got a meeting with some external stakeholders at 3 that I will need to jump to.
All right, so any other questions from the committee? Senator Westman has your budget, and obviously we'll be following up. And we will share with you the requests for funding that we had that relate to the programs that are administered by your department. And
Yeah.
I think Senator Westman can review those with you. There are times when you say, gee, yeah, we don't deny that it needs to be done. It didn't have the funding available. Or there are times when we might have a request and you'd say, that's not our priority at all. We would rather have it go here. So we do want your, let you know what's being asked and some opportunity for you to respond as part of that process. So
Monica,
yes.
Monica, I will be sending you that list, and I am free sometime early next week. It's town meeting week if you're around or your team is around.
We would be delighted to meet with you, Senator, to do a deeper dive on any and all of.
Oh, I'm sure I'd be delighted to meet with Senator Westman.
Who wouldn't, right?
Right, and particularly on his week off. Other comments or questions? Okay. All right, then. At this point, recognizing the commissioner has a hard stop, it's almost 3:00. It's been a long couple of days for this committee because we've had hearings and we had a hearing last night. So I'm going